the rejected bride who saved a kingdom. They said marrying the Alpha King was a death sentence. They said Elara Vane was a fool to accept, a weak girl from a dying pack traded like livestock to a monster. But when the blood bond sealed at dawn and enemies closed in from every shadow, she made a choice no one saw coming. She didn't beg for mercy. She didn't hide behind his power. She unleashed something ancient, something terrifying, something that would either save them all or destroy her completely. Stay until the end to see how a scorned bride became a legend. Like, comment with your city, and let's begin. The messenger arrived at dawn, and with him came the smell of death. Elara Vane stood at the edge of her pack's territory, watching the black-cloaked rider approach through the skeletal remains of what had once been a thriving forest. Behind her, the Vane pack huddled in makeshift shelters, their ribs visible beneath matted fur, their eyes hollow with hunger. 50 wolves remained. Last winter there had been 300. "He's here," her father whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. Marcus Vane had been a powerful alpha once, broad-shouldered, commanding, feared. Now he looked like a ghost wearing his own skin. "Elara, you don't have to do this." She didn't turn to face him. If she looked into his eyes, she might lose her nerve. "We both know that's a lie." The messenger dismounted with practiced efficiency, his boots crunching against frozen ground. He was young, perhaps 25, with the distinctive silver eyes of Draven Kael's personal guard. He didn't bow, didn't introduce himself. Simply held out a sealed letter bearing the mark of the Alpha King, a wolf's head crowned in thorns. Elara's hands trembled as she broke the wax seal. The message was brief, written in angular script that seemed to cut across the parchment. The bride will present herself at the Stoneheart Fortress by the next full moon. The blood ritual will commence at dawn. Refusal will be interpreted as an act of war against the crown. Your pack's protection ends the moment the sun sets on the appointed day. Draven Kael, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. 3 days, the messenger said flatly. You have 3 days to prepare yourself, Miss Vane. The king does not tolerate delays. She's just a child. Marcus lunged forward, but 2 of his own packmates held him back. They knew better. Everyone knew better than to challenge Draven Kael, even through his messenger. The silver-eyed guard's expression didn't change. She's 19, old enough to fulfill a marriage contract, old enough to understand the consequences of breaking one. He glanced past Elara, surveying the dying pack with clinical detachment. The king is offering protection, resources, and legitimacy to a pack that currently possesses none of those things. I suggest you focus on gratitude rather than protests. Elara finally spoke, her voice steadier than she felt. Tell your king I'll be there. The messenger nodded once, then remounted his horse. Before he left, he tossed a small leather pouch at her feet. It landed with a heavy clink, gold coins, enough to buy food for a month, maybe 2 if they were careful. A gesture of good faith, he said. The king takes care of what belongs to him, even before the bond is sealed. Then he was gone, disappearing into the gray morning like a shadow fleeing the light. Marcus finally broke free from the restraining hands and grabbed Elara's shoulders. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Elara pulled free gently, clutching the pouch of gold coins. You know that. We all know that. Her younger sister Mira stepped forward from the crowd. At 14, she still had some softness left in her face, though hunger had sharpened her cheekbones. The stories about him, Elara, they say he killed his first wife. They say he's more monster than man. They say a lot of things. Elara forced herself to smile, though it felt like cracking ice. Maybe some of them are even true, but what's definitely true is that we're out of time, out of food, and out of options. The frost sickness has killed 6 more this week. How many more funerals can we afford? Silence. The kind of silence that comes when everyone knows the answer, but no one wants to say it aloud. An elder named Cassian finally spoke up, his voice rough with age and guilt. The Alpha King's reputation isn't built on kindness, child. He's conquered 7 territories in the last decade. They call him the Winter Wolf because he shows no mercy, no warmth. His fortress is a tomb of stone where wolves go to die in service to his ambition. Then I'll be the first to walk out of it alive. Elara met his gaze without flinching. Because I'm not going there to die. I'm going there to buy us time, to buy us survival. And when I'm his queen, When I have his protection and his resources, I'll come back for all of you." "You really believe that?" Mira's voice cracked. "You believe he'll let you help us?" "I have to." Elara pulled her sister into a fierce embrace. "Because the alternative is watching all of you starve. And I won't do that. I can't." The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and denial. The pack pooled their remaining resources to create something resembling a wedding dress. A simple gown of white wool, embroidered with silver thread by hands that shook with weakness. Elara's mother had died 5 years ago, so the pack's elder women taught her the traditional binding rituals, their voices soft with sorrow. "The blood bond is sacred," old Cassian explained on the final night, sitting across from her beside a dying fire. "Once sealed, it cannot be broken except by death. You'll feel his emotions as your own. His pain will be your pain, his rage." He trailed off, staring into the flames. The Alpha King is not known for his control. There are stories of his previous queen, Seraphine. She lasted 3 years before they found her body in the northern tower. "Suicide?" Elara asked quietly. "That's what they called it." Cassian's expression was grim. "But there are wolves who whisper other truths, who say she tried to leave him, tried to break the bond through forbidden magic. The backlash killed her." Elara absorbed this information with the same numb acceptance she'd developed over the past 3 days. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Is there anything I should know? About the ritual? About surviving him?" Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Then with great reluctance he said, "Don't fight the bond. Whatever you feel from him, anger, cruelty, darkness, don't resist it. The bond feeds on resistance, twists it into pain for both parties. Acceptance is survival." "So I submit." Elara's voice was flat. "I bow down and become whatever he wants me to be. You survive." Cassian reached across the fire to grip her hand. "And survival, child, is the only victory that matters." The full moon rose cold and bright on the 3rd night. Elara stood alone in the forest clearing where she'd played as a child, wearing the white dress that felt like a burial shroud. Her father had tried to embrace her one last time before she left, but she'd pulled away. Emotions were dangerous now. Tears were dangerous. The escort arrived at midnight, 12 riders bearing the Alpha King's standard, led by the same silver-eyed messenger who'd delivered the summons. They brought a black horse for her, its coat gleaming like polished obsidian. "The king expects you by dawn," the messenger said. "We ride through the night." Elara mounted without assistance, ignoring the murmurs of her packmates who'd gathered to see her off. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. If she saw Mira's tears or her father's broken expression, she'd lose the fragile control holding her together. They rode north through territories Elara had never seen, past abandoned settlements and scorched battlefields. The war between the northern packs and the human kingdoms had devastated the land, leaving scars that might never heal. Draven Kael had ended the war through sheer brutality, crushing both sides until they had no choice but to accept his rule. Peace through domination. Unity through fear. And now Elara was riding toward the heart of that darkness. Stoneheart Fortress appeared on the horizon as the first rays of dawn touched the sky. It wasn't a fortress. It was a mountain carved into a weapon. Black stone towers clawed at the clouds, connected by walls thick enough to withstand siege engines. Guards patrolled battlements that seemed to stretch forever, their armor glinting like scales on some great serpent. "Mother of wolves," Elara breathed. The messenger glanced back at her. "Impressive, isn't it? The king built it himself. Every stone placed by his command, every wall raised by his will. They say he doesn't sleep, that he walks the ramparts every night, watching for threats that never stop coming." They crossed a drawbridge spanning a chasm so deep Elara couldn't see the bottom. The fortress gates opened with a groan of ancient metal, revealing a courtyard filled with warriors, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all wearing the winter wolf's crest, all watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. Elara dismounted on trembling legs, forcing herself to stand straight despite exhaustion. A woman approached, tall, severe, dressed in black leather armor decorated with silver wolves. Her eyes were the color of ice. "I am Thorn, captain of the king's guard." Her voice matched her appearance, cold, sharp. unwelcoming. "You're the Vane girl." "I'm Elara Vane, daughter of Alpha Marcus Vane." Elara met her stare without flinching. "And I'm here to marry your king." Thorn's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent to approval. "At least you have some spine. You'll need it." She gestured to two attendants waiting nearby. "They'll prepare you for the ritual. The king is waiting in the blood chapel. Don't keep him waiting long. He's not known for his patience." The attendants led Elara through corridors of black stone lit by torches that burned with strange blue flames. She caught glimpses of luxury mixed with militarism, tapestries depicting brutal battles hanging beside polished weapons, flowers growing in alcoves guarded by armed sentries. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. They brought her to a chamber filled with steam and the scent of sage. Without ceremony, the attendant stripped her travel-stained clothes and guided her into a bath hot enough to sting. They scrubbed her skin until it turned pink, washed her dark hair with oils that smelled of winter forests, then dressed her in a gown that made her wedding dress look like rags. This dress was silver and white, embroidered with patterns that seemed to move in the candlelight. It fit perfectly, clinging to curves she barely knew she had. The bodice was cut low enough to reveal the smooth skin of her throat, the place where the blood bond would be sealed. "The king chose this himself," one attendant murmured. "He has particular tastes." They led her to the blood chapel as dawn broke fully across the sky. The chapel was smaller than she'd expected, circular, with walls of white stone that seemed to glow from within. Candles burned in a ring around a central altar, their flames unnaturally still despite the draft. And there, standing before the altar, was Draven Kale. Elara's breath caught. The rumors hadn't prepared her. Nothing could have prepared her. He stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and powerfully built, dressed in black leather that seemed to absorb light. His hair was dark as midnight, falling just past his collar, and his eyes, those eyes were the color of molten gold, burning with an intensity that made her want to look away and step closer at the same time. But it was his presence that truly shocked her. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, so strong she could feel it pressing against her skin. This wasn't just an alpha. This was something older, something primal, something that made every instinct in her body scream both danger and submit. Elara Vane. His voice was deep, resonant, carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You came. Did you doubt I would?" She was proud that her voice barely shook. "Most would have run." He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate. Most would have chosen their pack's slow death over binding themselves to a monster. "Then most are cowards." The words escaped before she could stop them. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Then Draven laughed, a short, harsh sound devoid of humor. "Brave or foolish, time will tell which." He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could see flecks of amber in his golden eyes. "Do you understand what you're agreeing to? The blood bond is eternal, unbreakable. You'll feel everything I feel, every rage, every darkness, every moment of cruelty that made them call me the Winter Wolf. Can you live with that?" Elara forced herself to meet his gaze. "Can you live with feeling my fear, my grief, my hatred of what you forced me to do?" Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or recognition. "At least you're honest." He turned to the elderly priest waiting by the altar. "Begin." The ritual was older than memory, spoken in a language Elara barely understood. The priest cut their palms with a ceremonial blade. First Draven's, then hers. Blood welled up, dark and viscous in the candlelight. "Join hands," the priest commanded. Elara hesitated for only a heartbeat before placing her bleeding palm against Draven's. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, and she gasped. "Hold," the priest said, beginning a chant that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. The bond took hold slowly at first, a warmth spreading from their joined hands, up her arm, into her chest. Then it hit like an avalanche. Emotions that weren't hers flooded through her consciousness. Rage, loneliness, grief so profound it felt like drowning, and beneath it all, a desperate, terrible emptiness that had nothing to do with power or conquest. He's alone, she realized with shock. Despite everything, the fortress, the army, the crown, he's utterly alone. But there was no time to process that revelation because the bond wasn't finished. It dug deeper, past emotions, into something more fundamental. She felt her own essence intertwining with his, two souls becoming irrevocably linked. When it finally settled, she could feel him as a constant presence in the back of her mind. Not thoughts, but awareness. She knew, without looking, that his heart was racing, that his hand trembled slightly against hers, though his face showed nothing. "It is done." The priest stepped back. "By blood and bond you are joined, Alpha King Draven Kale and Queen Elara Vane, bound until death." Draven released her hand slowly, his golden eyes searching her face. "You felt it." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, and you're still standing." Something that might have been respect entered his voice. "Stronger than you look, Vane." "I have to be." Elara cradled her bleeding palm, feeling the wound already starting to heal, faster than normal, faster than should be possible. "My pack is depending on me." "Your pack is dead." The words were brutal, delivered without emotion. "You belong to me now, to this fortress, this kingdom. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be." Anger flared, hot, righteous, and entirely her own. "They're not dead. They're starving and desperate, but they're alive, and I didn't agree to this bond to abandon them." Draven's expression darkened. Through the bond, she felt his rage building like a storm. "You agreed to this bond because you had no choice. Don't pretend it was noble sacrifice. It was survival." "It was both." Elara stepped closer, driven by something reckless and dangerous. "I survived so I could save them, and you're going to help me do it." "Am I?" His voice dropped to a growl that raised every hair on her body. "You've been my queen for 5 minutes and you're already making demands?" "I'm not making demands, I'm stating facts." Elara could feel her own heartbeat thundering, could feel his through the bond, equally wild, equally dangerous. "You married me to secure an alliance with the Southern Territories. My father's pack may be small, but we have connections, trade routes, intelligence networks you need. But those connections die if my pack dies. So if you want your alliance to mean anything, you'll send supplies south. Today." The silence stretched so long Elara thought she'd miscalculated catastrophically. Then Draven threw his head back and laughed, genuine this time, full of dark amusement. "You have fire," he said finally. "I'll give you that." He turned to Captain Thorne, who'd been standing guard by the door. "Send a supply caravan south, food, medicine, whatever the Vane pack needs to survive the winter." Thorne's expression was carefully neutral. "My king, the southern route is still vulnerable to raiders. Sending supplies without adequate protection. Then send adequate protection." Draven's voice turned sharp. 20 warriors, fully armed. They're to remain with the Vane pack until further notice." He looked back at Elara. "Satisfied?" She wanted to say yes, wanted to feel victorious. But through the bond, she felt something else. A calculation, a test. He was measuring her, weighing her worth, deciding whether she was useful or disposable. "Thank you," she said carefully. "My father will be grateful." "I don't do this for gratitude." Draven moved to the chapel doors, pausing with his hand on the iron handle. "I do it because a starving, desperate pack is useless to me. A pack with resources can be put to work defending the southern border." He glanced back at her. "Never forget, Elara. Every kindness I show has a purpose. Every mercy serves my kingdom. That's the man you're bound to, the monster they warned you about." Then he was gone, leaving Elara alone in the chapel with the dying candles and the priest's knowing gaze. "He tests everyone," the old priest said softly, "to see if they'll break." "I won't break." Elara touched her throat, where she could feel the bond humming beneath her skin. "I can't afford to." The first week in Stoneheart Fortress taught Elara that survival required more than just endurance. It required adaptation. Draven kept her at arm's length, communicating through servants and messengers, appearing only at formal dinners where they sat at opposite ends of a table long enough to seat 30. Through the bond, she felt his constant vigilance, his mind always working, calculating, planning for threats she couldn't see. But she also felt moments of unexpected vulnerability. Late at night, when he thought she was asleep, she'd feel his loneliness crash over her like a wave. In those moments, the terrifying Alpha King became something almost human, something wounded and guarded and desperately trying to convince himself he didn't need connection. She never mentioned it. Instinct told her he'd only pull further away if she acknowledged what the bond revealed. Instead, she focused on learning. She studied the fortress's layout, memorized the faces and names of key warriors, and quietly observed the power dynamics that governed this strange, violent court. Captain Thorn became an unexpected ally, respecting Elara's refusal to play the helpless bride. "Most queens hide in their chambers," Thorn said one afternoon during training exercises in the courtyard. "They pretend the blood and violence doesn't exist." Elara watched two warriors spar with real blades, their movements brutal and efficient. "Pretending doesn't change reality, and I'm not most queens." "No." Thorn's ice-blue eyes gleamed with approval. "You're not." It was during one of these training sessions that the first attack came. Elara was crossing the courtyard at sunset when the warning bells erupted across the fortress. Warriors poured from barracks, armor clanking, weapons drawn. Through the bond, she felt Draven's instant alertness. Not fear, never fear, but cold, calculating readiness. "Raiders at the eastern gate," someone shouted. "At least 50, maybe more." Thorn grabbed Elara's arm. Get to the keep, now." But Elara had spent weeks watching, learning, understanding how this fortress operated. The eastern gate was deliberately undermanned, a tactical choice Draven had made to draw enemies into ambush zones. But if the raiders had more numbers than expected, she reached through the bond without thinking, sending a pulse of warning. "East gate needs reinforcements. They're testing your defenses." Draven's response came like thunder in her mind. "Stay inside. Not a chance." She broke free from Thorn and ran toward the armory. If she was going to survive in this world of violence and conquest, she needed to understand it, needed to be part of it. The armory master tried to stop her, but one look at her face, and perhaps something he sensed through the bond that connected all pack members to their alpha, and by extension to their queen, made him step aside. Elara grabbed a short blade, lighter than the warrior's swords but still deadly. Outside, the battle had begun. Raiders crashed against the eastern defenses like waves against stone. They were human, deserters from the war, driven to desperation by the same forces that had devastated the wolf packs. Elara could see their desperation in every wild sword swing, every reckless charge, and she could see Draven in the center of it all, a whirlwind of controlled violence. He didn't just fight, he dominated. Every movement precise, efficient, lethal. Warriors fell around him, but none could touch him. Through the bond, she felt his battle fury, felt the cold rage that made him unstoppable. But she also felt something else. A darkness that wasn't anger. It was emptiness. As if the violence filled some void inside him that could never be satisfied. A raider broke through the line, charging directly at Elara. She reacted on instinct, bringing her blade up in a clumsy parry that nearly knocked the weapon from her hand. The raider laughed, pressing his advantage. Then his head snapped back as Draven appeared beside her, moving so fast he seemed to teleport. The Alpha King's blade found the raider's throat before Elara could draw breath. "I told you to stay inside." Draven's voice was eerily calm despite the carnage around them. "I don't take orders well." Elara forced herself to look at the body at her feet. "I needed to see what my world looks like now." "This?" Draven gestured at the battlefield with his blood-stained sword. "This is Tuesday. If you can't handle Tuesday, you won't survive what's coming." "Then teach me." The words came out stronger than she felt. "Stop hiding me away like fragile glass. If I'm your queen, make me useful." Draven stared at her for a long moment, golden eyes unreadable. Then, impossibly, he smiled, sharp and fierce and somehow approving. "Thorn!" he called without looking away from Elara. "The queen wants training. See that she gets it." And just like that, everything changed. The training began before dawn and didn't end until Elara could barely lift her arms. Captain Thorn proved to be a merciless instructor, drilling Elara through combat forms until muscle memory replaced conscious thought. The fortress courtyard became a second home, a place of bruises, exhaustion, and slow, painful progress. Warriors gathered to watch, some amused by the queen's determination, others openly scornful. "She'll quit before the week's out," Elara overheard one soldier mutter during her third morning session. "Soft southern wolves don't last in the north." She proved him wrong by showing up every morning for 2 months straight. But physical training was only part of what changed in those weeks. Something else was happening, something Elara didn't understand and couldn't control. The bond with Draven had awakened something dormant inside her, a force that pulsed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat, growing stronger with each passing day. It started small, a candle that reignited itself when she walked past, a training dummy that splintered under her strike with far more force than her strength should have produced. Dreams filled with silver light and voices speaking in languages she'd never learned. She tried to hide it, tried to pretend the strange occurrences were coincidence or imagination, but Thorn noticed everything. "Your eyes," the captain said one morning, studying Elara with unnerving intensity. "They flash silver when you're angry. I've seen it twice now." Tricks of the light. Elara focused on adjusting her blade grip, avoiding Thorn's gaze. "Don't lie to someone who spent 20 years reading body language." Thorn crossed her arms. "You're changing. The bond is doing something to you. You need to tell the king." "Tell him what? That I'm broken? That the bond is defective?" Elara's voice rose despite her attempt at control. "He already sees me as a political tool. I won't give him a reason to see me as a liability. Or you could give him a reason to see you as powerful." Thorn's ice-blue eyes gleamed. Power is the only language Draven truly respects. Before Elara could respond, warning bells shattered the morning calm. Not the eastern gate this time, the western watchtowers, overlooking the mountain pass that connected the northern territories to the neutral lands beyond. Runners arrived within minutes, breathless and terrified. "Enemy force approaching from the west, organized troops, not raiders, real soldiers with siege equipment." The fortress erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors flooded battlements, archers took positions, and commanders barked orders across courtyards suddenly thick with tension. Through the bond, Elara felt Draven's instant calculation, weighing threats, assessing defenses, preparing for violence on a scale that made the previous skirmishes look like children's games. She found him in the war room, surrounded by maps and grim-faced generals. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment something crossed his face. Concern, maybe, though it vanished too quickly to be certain. "You should be in the inner keep," he said flatly. "I should be wherever I'm most useful." Elara moved to the map table, studying the tactical markers. "Who's attacking?" A general named Corvus answered, his scarred face twisted with disgust. "Lord Malser's forces. Human warlord from the Eastern Kingdoms. He's been gaining power since the war ended, consolidating deserters and mercenaries into something resembling an army." "Why attack now?" Elara traced the approach routes marked on the map. "Stoneheart has never fallen. It's suicide. Unless he knows something we don't." Draven's voice was hard. "Or unless he's testing our defenses for someone else. Someone with deeper resources." "The Coalition." Thorn spoke the name like a curse. "The human kingdoms that never accepted your rule. They've been quiet too long." Draven's jaw tightened. Through the bond, Elara felt his frustration, the exhausting reality of being a king who couldn't rest, who had to anticipate threats from every direction simultaneously. "How many troops does Malser have?" "Scouts report 300, maybe more." Corvus pointed to the narrow mountain pass. "They'll hit us at dawn tomorrow. The pass is defensible, but if they have siege equipment, they'll pound our outer defenses until something breaks." Draven studied the map with predatory focus. "We hold the pass. No retreat, no surrender. If they want Stoneheart, they'll have to climb over their own dead to reach it." The generals nodded, already moving to implement orders. But Elara's attention caught on something else, a secondary path marked in faded ink, winding through treacherous terrain north of the main pass. "This route," she tapped the map. "It's barely marked. Why?" "Old Smuggler's Trail," Thorn explained. "Too dangerous for large forces. Narrow ledges, unstable rock. We don't guard it because no sane commander would risk it. But a desperate one might." Elara looked at Draven. "If Malser's attack on the main pass is a feint, he could send a strike force through here while you're focused on the obvious threat." Silence. The kind that comes when everyone realizes they've missed something critical. Draven moved around the table until he stood directly in front of Elara. His golden eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're certain?" "I'm not certain of anything." Elara forced herself to hold his gaze. "But I've spent my life reading desperate men. My father, the alphas who abandoned us, the traders who charged triple prices because they knew we'd pay. They all had the same look. The same willingness to risk everything on a foolish gamble. And Mouser attacking Stoneheart head-on? That's not strategy. That's desperation." For a long moment, Draven said nothing. Then he turned to Corvus. "Send 50 warriors to guard the smuggler's trail. If anyone comes through, kill them all." "My king, 50 warriors could turn the tide at the main pass." "Do it." Draven's voice cut like steel. "If the queen is wrong, we've wasted resources. If she's right, she just saved us from a knife in the back." The generals dispersed, leaving Elara alone with Draven in the war room. He poured 2 glasses of dark wine, handing her one without asking if she wanted it. "You're learning," he said quietly. "I had good teachers." Elara sipped the wine, rich, bitter, warming. "My pack didn't survive this long by trusting the obvious." "Your pack survived because they had you." Draven leaned against the table, and for the first time since their wedding, he looked at her without the mask of the Alpha King firmly in place. "I've been watching you train, watching you adapt. Most wolves would have broken by now. Instead, you're thriving." "I don't feel like I'm thriving." Elara set down her glass. "I feel like I'm drowning and calling it swimming. That's what survival looks like from the inside." Draven's expression softened fractionally. "You think I built this fortress because I felt powerful? I built it because I was terrified, because every enemy I destroyed spawned 2 more, because the only way to stop drowning was to become the flood." Through the bond, Elara felt the truth of his words, the bone-deep weariness of a man who'd been fighting for so long he'd forgotten what peace felt like. She stepped closer, driven by impulse she didn't fully understand. "You don't have to fight alone anymore." Draven's laugh was harsh. "Don't mistake a political alliance for partnership, Elara. You're here because your pack needed protection. I'm here because I need your territory secured. That's the extent of what we are." "Is it?" Elara held up her scarred palm, the one that had been cut during their blood bond. "This says otherwise. Every night I feel your loneliness. Every morning I wake up knowing you didn't sleep. You can pretend we're strangers playing roles, but the bond doesn't lie." Something dangerous flashed in Draven's eyes. "You don't want to know what else the bond reveals, little queen. You don't want to feel the things I've done, the choices I've made. The blood on my hands would drown you." "Try me." Elara moved closer still until she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "I'm stronger than you think." For a heartbeat, she thought he might close the distance between them, thought he might let the walls drop and show her the man beneath the monster. But then his expression shuddered, and the Alpha King returned in full force. "Get some rest." His voice was cold again, distant. "Tomorrow will be brutal." He left her alone in the war room, surrounded by maps of territories built on violence and strategies written in blood. The attack came exactly as predicted. At dawn, with the kind of precision that confirmed this was no random raid. Elara watched from the inner battlements as Mouser's forces crashed against the fortress like a steel tide. The clash of weapons echoed across the mountains, punctuated by screams and the terrible thunder of siege equipment battering stone. But the main assault wasn't where the real danger manifested. Corvus found Elara 2 hours into the battle, his armor splattered with blood that wasn't his own. "You were right about the smuggler's trail. We caught them halfway through, 30 men, elite soldiers, heading straight for the inner keep. If you hadn't warned us." "How many did we lose?" Elara gripped the battlement railing. 12 dead, 20 wounded. Corvus's expression was grim. "But we held. The strike force is eliminated." Through the bond, Elara felt Draven's savage satisfaction. The gambit had failed. Mouser's forces were breaking against superior defenses and better positioning. By midday, the enemy would retreat, leaving their dead behind as testament to the futility of challenging the Winter Wolf. But something felt wrong. Elara couldn't explain it, not with logic, not with tactical knowledge. But the strange force that had been growing inside her pulsed with sudden urgency, like a warning bell only she could hear. "Where's the king?" she demanded. "Leading the counterattack at the Western Pass. He's driving them back personally. Corvus stopped as Elara pushed past him, running for the stairs. Your Majesty, you can't go out there. She ignored him. Ignored everything except the certainty screaming through her bones that something was catastrophically wrong. She grabbed weapons from fallen warriors as she ran. A short sword, a dagger, anything that might be useful. The Western Pass was chaos. Bodies littered the narrow mountain trail, both human and wolf, their blood turning the stones slick and treacherous. Draven fought at the front, a whirlwind of controlled violence that cut through enemy soldiers like they were made of paper. But Elara's attention caught on something else. 3 of Draven's own warriors, fighting in the second rank, moved with synchronized precision that felt choreographed. And when one of them glanced toward the king, his expression held no loyalty, only cold calculation. Traitors. Hidden among Draven's own forces, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Elara opened her mouth to scream a warning, but the traitors moved first. All 3 turned on Draven simultaneously, their blades aimed with lethal precision at the gap in his armor. The vulnerable spot every warrior learned to protect, but couldn't fully defend while engaged with other enemies. Time seemed to slow. Elara saw the betrayal, saw Draven's realization come a heartbeat too late, saw death about to claim the Alpha King. And something inside her exploded. Silver light erupted from her body, not metaphorical, not imagined, but real and blinding and impossibly powerful. It swept across the battlefield like a physical force, and where it touched Draven's warriors, their wounds began to close. Gashes sealed themselves, broken bones straightened. Men who'd been moments from death gasped as strength flooded back into their limbs. The traitors screamed as the light burned them, their weapons clattering uselessly against stone as they collapsed. Elara felt the power pouring out of her in waves she couldn't control. It wasn't just healing, it was transformation. Every warrior touched by the silver light stood straighter, moved faster, fought with renewed ferocity that turned the tide of battle in seconds. Then the power cut off as suddenly as it had appeared and Elara collapsed. She woke in her chambers, surrounded by worried faces. Thorn, Corvus, several of the fortress healers, and Draven, standing at the window with his back to her, radiating tension through the bond. How many saw? His voice was carefully controlled. Everyone on the Western Pass, my king. Thorn's tone was neutral. Word is spreading through the fortress. They're calling it a miracle. It wasn't a miracle. Dr. Draven finally turned, and his golden eyes burned with an intensity that made Elara's breath catch. It was power, raw, uncontrolled, and completely unprecedented. He moved to the bedside, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. What are you? I don't know. Elara sat up despite protests from the healers. I didn't mean to. I just saw them about to kill you, and something inside me broke open. The bond. One of the healers, an ancient woman named Moira, spoke with certainty. The blood bond awakened something dormant in her bloodline. It's rare, but not unheard of. Some wolves carry latent abilities that only manifest under extreme circumstances. Healing isn't a wolf ability, Draven countered. Wolves don't emit silver light and close fatal wounds with a thought. No, Moira agreed, but the old bloodlines do. The first wolves, before the corruption of war and territory disputes, diluted the pure strains. They had powers modern wolves have forgotten. If this girl carries that ancient heritage, then she's more valuable than any political alliance. Draven's expression was unreadable, and more dangerous. I saved your warriors. Elara forced steel into her voice, despite her exhaustion. I saved you. How is that dangerous? Because power that's strong draws attention. Draven moved to the door. Mouser's attack wasn't random. Someone is testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. And now you've just revealed yourself as something worth capturing, worth studying, worth killing. He left before Elara could respond, but through the bond she felt his conflict, a war between protectiveness and pragmatism that had no clear victor. The next 3 days proved Draven's warning prescient. Rumors about the silver light spread beyond the fortress, carried by survivors and spies alike. Delegations began arriving, some offering alliances, others demanding Elara be turned over to various councils and authorities for examination. A few whispered about witchcraft, and corruption, claiming she'd tainted the sacred blood bond with forbidden magic. Draven rejected them all with cold efficiency, but Elara could feel his stress building through the bond. Every new threat, every political maneuver, every hint of instability added weight to his already crushing responsibilities. She found him alone on the battlements 5 nights after the battle, staring out at the mountains with an expression of such profound weariness it made her chest ache. "You should be resting," he said without turning. "So should you." Elara joined him at the railing. "When was the last time you slept through the night?" "I don't remember." The admission came quietly, almost reluctantly. Sleep is a luxury kings can't afford. Even kings need rest, not when every moment of weakness is an invitation for enemies to strike. Draven finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. "You changed everything on that battlefield, Elara. Every calculation, every strategy I've built over a decade, all of it's obsolete now. Because you're not just a political alliance anymore. You're a weapon, and weapons always attract those who want to use them." "I'm not a weapon." Elara met his gaze without flinching. "I'm a person who discovered she has power. There's a difference." "Not to our enemies." Draven turned back to the mountains. "They'll come for you. Not with armies, but with poison and assassins and schemes we can't predict. And I can't protect you from shadows." "Then stop trying to protect me alone." Elara touched his arm, feeling him tense under her fingers. "That's what the bond is for, isn't it? Sharing burdens, facing threats together." "You sound like you believe that." "I do." Elara stepped closer, close enough to feel his warmth in the cold mountain air. "I didn't choose this bond, and neither did you. But it exists. And maybe instead of fighting what it means, we could try using it as actual partnership." Draven was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. "I don't know how to do that." The vulnerability in those words hit harder than any declaration. This man, this terrifying, powerful, seemingly invincible Alpha King, genuinely didn't know how to share power or trust another person with his burdens. "Then we'll figure it out together." Elara squeezed his arm. "Starting with you getting some actual sleep tonight." "Bossy little queen," Draven murmured, but something in his expression had softened. "Someone has to be." For the first time since their wedding, Draven smiled, really smiled. Not the sharp, dangerous expression he showed enemies, but something genuine and almost warm. It transformed his face, made him look years younger, reminded Elara that beneath the winter wolf was a man who'd been fighting alone for far too long. The moment shattered as a runner appeared on the battlements, breathless and panicked. "My king!" Emergency in the barracks, the warriors who were healed by the queen's power. "Something's wrong." They ran through corridors lit by torchlight, arriving at the barracks to find chaos. The warriors Elara had healed during the battle were convulsing on their cots, silver light flickering beneath their skin like lightning trapped under glass. Their screams echoed off stone walls. "What's happening to them?" Elara grabbed the nearest healer. "The power you gave them, it's not stable. It's burning them from the inside out." The healer's face was ashen. "If we don't find a way to stop it, they'll die before dawn." Draven's hand clamped on Elara's shoulder. "Can you reverse it? Pull the power back?" "I don't know how I gave it to them in the first place." Panic clawed at Elara's throat. "I don't know how any of this works." "Then figure it out." Draven's voice was hard but not cruel. "Because these men trusted you. They believed your power would save them, prove they were right." Elara moved among the convulsing warriors, feeling helpless and terrified. She'd meant to heal them, meant to give them strength. Instead, she'd poisoned them with power they couldn't contain. One warrior, a young man named Kyle, who couldn't be more than 20, grabbed her wrist with trembling fingers. "Please," he gasped. "It hurts. Make it stop." Elara closed her eyes, reaching for the strange force inside her. It responded immediately, surging up like a tide. But this time, instead of pushing it outward, she tried to pull, tried to draw back the excess power she'd flooded into these warriors. The connection formed instantly. She felt Kyle's pain, felt the silver light tearing through his body like wildfire, and she felt the solution, instinctive and certain. The power needed an anchor, a source to return to. "Hold on," she whispered. Then she opened herself completely to the bond, not just to Draven, but to every warrior in the room. The silver light responded, flowing back toward her in streams of pure energy. It hurt. The power that had felt natural flowing outward felt like broken glass coming back in. But Elara held steady, pulling the excess energy from each warrior until their convulsions stopped and their breathing steadied. When the last warrior relaxed into normal sleep, Elara collapsed. She came to in Draven's arms, being carried through the corridors. Through her blurred vision, she saw warriors lining the halls, all of them, the ones she'd healed and the ones who'd only watched, bowing their heads as she passed. "They're saluting you," Draven said quietly. "You just proved you'd risk yourself to fix your mistakes. That's more than most leaders ever do." "I almost killed them." Elara's voice was raw. "But you didn't." Draven kicked open the door to her chambers, laying her gently on the bed. "You learned, you adapted, you survived. That's all any of us can do." He started to leave, but Elara caught his hand. "Stay, please, just until I fall asleep." Draven hesitated, and through the bond she felt his internal war, duty versus desire, isolation versus connection. Then, slowly, he sat on the edge of the bed. "Only until you sleep," he agreed. Elara closed her eyes, feeling his presence like an anchor in dark water. The last thing she felt before sleep claimed her was his hand, rough and warm, carefully brushing hair from her face. And for the first time since arriving at Stoneheart Fortress, she didn't dream of death. She woke to find Draven still there, slumped in the chair beside her bed, his head tilted back against the wall in fitful sleep. Dawn light filtered through the narrow window, painting his face in shades of gold and shadow. For a moment, Elara simply watched him, this man who carried the weight of kingdoms on his shoulders, who'd never learned to share that burden, who looked almost peaceful in these stolen moments of rest. Then his eyes snapped open, golden and alert, and the moment shattered. "You're awake." He straightened, and the vulnerability she'd glimpsed vanished behind his usual mask. "How do you feel?" "Like I was turned inside out and put back together wrong." Elara sat up slowly, testing her limits. The silver power still hummed beneath her skin, but quieter now, more controlled. "The warriors?" "All stable. You saved them." Draven stood, moving to the window. "Word has spread beyond the fortress. 3 more delegations arrived overnight, all demanding audiences. The human kingdoms, the eastern wolf packs, even representatives from the southern trade cities. Everyone wants to know what you are. I'm a 19-year-old girl who's in way over her head." Elara threw off the blankets, ignoring her body's protests. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing." Draven's jaw tightened. "But that won't hold forever. Sooner or later, we'll have to address what your power means for the balance of territories." A knock interrupted them. Thorn entered without waiting for permission, her expression grim. "My king, we have a situation. The southern border, there's been an attack on the Vane Pack." Elara's heart stopped. "What?" "Raiders hit them 3 hours ago. Your father's warriors fought them off, but..." Thorn's ice-blue eyes met Elara's. "Your sister was taken." The world tilted. Elara gripped the bedpost to keep from falling. "Mira! They took Mira!" "The raiders left a message." Thorn held out a blood-stained piece of parchment. "They want you in exchange for her safe return. You have 2 days to present yourself at the old trading post near the eastern border, alone and unarmed. If you refuse or if we send troops, they'll kill her." Draven took the message, his expression darkening with every word. Through the bond, Elara felt his rage building, cold, calculated, and absolutely lethal. "This is a trap. They're using your sister as bait to capture you." "I know." Elara's voice was surprisingly steady. "But that doesn't change what I have to do." "You're not going," Draven crumpled the message. "We'll send a strike force, rescue your sister, and eliminate whoever orchestrated this. And if they kill her the moment they see your warriors..." Elara moved toward him. "Mira is 14 years old. She's terrified and alone, and she's counting on me to save her. I won't let her die because I was too afraid to face danger. This isn't about fear. It's about strategy." Draven's voice rose. "You're exactly what they want. The moment you walk into that trap, you're gone. They'll either kill you to eliminate the threat you represent, or worse, they'll keep you alive to study your power. Either way, I lose the alliance, lose the tactical advantage, and Mira probably dies anyway. So your solution is to let my sister die for certain? Elara felt her own anger rising to match his. To sacrifice a child to protect your kingdom's interests? Yes. The word came out flat and absolute. That's exactly what I'm saying. I've made harder choices than this. So will you, if you survive long enough to understand what ruling actually means. The honesty was brutal, but Elara had learned to read what lay beneath Draven's words. Through the bond, she felt his conflict, the part of him that wanted to protect her warring with the part that had learned, through bitter experience, that sentiment got people killed. Then it's a good thing I'm not ruling anything. Elara moved toward the door. I'm going to save my sister. You can either help me or get out of my way. Draven moved faster than thought, blocking her path. I can't let you do this. You don't own me. Elara met his golden gaze without flinching. The bond makes us equals, remember? I didn't agree to become your prisoner. You agreed to become my queen. That means your life isn't just your own anymore. It belongs to everyone who depends on this kingdom's stability. Draven's hands gripped her shoulders. I know you want to save her. I know it's tearing you apart, but walking into that trap won't save her. It'll just get you both killed. Maybe. Elara placed her hands over his. Or maybe my power is strong enough to turn their trap into their grave. We won't know until I try. That's insane. That's survival. Elara stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath on her face. You taught me that. You said survival means doing what others can't, being what others won't. Well, I can't abandon my sister, and I won't let fear dictate my choices. So I'm going. The only question is whether you'll trust me enough to help. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they hadn't said. Then Draven's expression shifted, not softening exactly but recalculating. She could feel his mind working through the bond, weighing risks and possibilities. If I help, he said slowly, you follow my lead, my strategy, my rules. Agreed. And if I say retreat, you retreat. No arguments, no heroics. I can't promise that. Then I can't help you. Draven released her shoulders, stepping back. Those are my terms. Elara wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle this alone, but she'd learned enough about survival to know when to compromise. Fine. I'll follow your lead. Unless Mira's life is directly threatened, then all bets are off. Draven's laugh was sharp and humorless. At least you're honest about your limits. He turned to Thorn. Gather a strike team. 20 of our best warriors, all volunteers who understand they might not come back. We move at nightfall. My king, the message said she goes alone. The message was written by people who think we're predictable. Draven's smile was dangerous. They're about to learn otherwise. The next 12 hours passed in frantic preparation. Draven laid out his strategy with the precision of someone who'd orchestrated countless operations. Elara would approach the trading post alone as demanded, but warriors would be positioned in the surrounding forest, ready to strike the moment the trap was sprung. The goal wasn't rescue. It was annihilation. They'd eliminate the raiders, save Mira, and send a message that threatening the Alpha King's family came with a death sentence. But as Elara listened to the plan, a different idea took shape in her mind. These raiders weren't random criminals. They were organized, well-informed, and backed by someone with resources. Someone who knew about her power and wanted to capture it, which meant this trap was just the opening move in a larger game. She found Moira, the ancient healer, alone in the infirmary. I need to know more about my power, about what I am. The old woman studied her with knowing eyes. You're finally asking the right questions. I don't have time for riddles. Elara's voice was tight. My sister's life depends on understanding what this silver light can do. It can do anything. Moira's answer was simple and terrifying. The ancient bloodlines didn't just heal or fight, they reshaped reality itself, built kingdoms from nothing, toppled empires with a thought. But that power came with a price. It consumed those who wielded it, burned through their lives like fire through dry wood. Most didn't survive to see their 30th year. So I'm dying. Elara absorbed this with the same numb acceptance she'd developed for every other nightmare revelation. How long do I have? That depends on how much you use the power. Moira moved to a shelf lined with ancient texts. The more you draw on it, the faster it consumes you. But there are ways to extend your time. Channel the power through others. Share the burden. Through the blood bond. Understanding clicked into place. That's why it manifested after I bonded with Draven. His strength gives me an anchor. Partially, Moira pulled down a leather-bound book, its pages yellow with age. But the bond is a conduit that flows both ways. The more you use your power, the more you'll drain him as well. You could burn through both your lives in a single reckless act. Elara thought of the warriors she'd healed, how the power had nearly killed them before she'd learned to pull it back. What if I channel it through more than just Draven? Through multiple people? Then you'd need them to consent to the bond, to willingly tie their life force to yours. Moira's expression was grave, and you'd need to be strong enough to control that many connections simultaneously. Most who tried that technique went mad from the mental strain. But it's possible. Possible and advisable are very different things, child. I didn't ask if it was advisable. Elara took the ancient book, feeling its weight. I asked if it was possible, because I think I'm going to need it. She spent the remaining hours studying the text, absorbing techniques and warnings written in languages she somehow understood despite never learning them. The power whispered to her through the pages, showing her visions of what she could become, and what she'd lose in the process. Draven found her as the sun set, surrounded by ancient books and flickering candles. You're planning something. It wasn't a question. Through the bond, he'd felt her determination crystallizing into something dangerous. The raiders aren't the real threat. Elara looked up from the text. They're pawns. Someone powerful sent them. Someone who wants to test my abilities before making their real move. So we're going to give them a show they'll never forget. What are you talking about? I'm talking about turning their trap into our weapon. Elara stood, moving to the map table. They expect me to be weak, to be a victim. Instead, I'm going to show them exactly how dangerous I've become. But I'll need your warriors to trust me completely. Draven's expression darkened. Whatever you're planning, the answer is no. You haven't heard the plan yet. I don't need to. I can feel it through the bond. You're planning something reckless that puts you at risk. His voice dropped to a growl. I won't allow it. You don't have a choice, Elara met his golden eyes, because the alternative is watching Mira die while we play it safe. And I won't do that. I can't. They stared at each other, locked in a battle of wills that had been building since the day they'd bonded. Finally, Draven spoke, his voice rough with barely controlled emotion. Tell me the plan, all of it. Then I'll decide. Elara laid it out, the risk, the danger, the potential cost. With every word, she felt Draven's resistance growing through the bond. When she finished, the silence was absolute. That's not a plan, Draven said finally. That's suicide. That's the only way to save Mira and eliminate the threat permanently. Elara moved closer. Trust me, please. Trust isn't the issue. Draven's hands clenched into fists. The issue is that your plan requires you to expose yourself to an entire enemy force while channeling power that could kill you. Even if it works, the backlash will prove I'm too dangerous to capture. Elara cut him off. That's the point. We don't just rescue Mira, we make sure no one ever tries this again. Draven turned away, struggling with something Elara felt clearly through the bond. The terrifying realization that he cared. That somewhere between political alliance and shared danger, she'd become more than a strategic asset. She'd become someone he couldn't bear to lose. If this goes wrong, he said quietly, if you die out there, it won't just destroy the alliance. It'll destroy me. You understand that? Elara's breath caught. It was the closest he'd ever come to admitting the bond meant more than politics. Then we make sure it doesn't go wrong. He faced her again, and the raw emotion in his golden eyes nearly broke her resolve. I've lost people before, people I cared about. I won't survive losing you too. You won't have to. Elara took his hands. Because I'm coming back. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. Then help me keep it. She squeezed his fingers. Give me your best warriors. Trust me to do what needs to be done. And be ready to finish what I start. For a long moment, Draven said nothing. Then with great reluctance, he nodded. The warriors are yours. But I'm coming with you. Not as your king, as your partner. The bond works both ways, remember? If you're channeling power through me, I need to be close enough to anchor you. That puts you at risk too. I know. His smile was sharp and fierce. But that's what partnership means, right? Sharing the danger, facing threats together. Elara realized he was throwing her own words back at her. Despite everything, she smiled. You were listening. I always listen. Draven pulled her closer, and for the first time since their wedding, he embraced her, not as a king tolerating a political necessity, but as a man holding on to something precious. Just come back to me. Whatever it takes. Whoever you have to become out there, come back. I will. Elara leaned into his warmth, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. I promise. They rode out at midnight, Elara, Draven, and 20 warriors who'd volunteered knowing they might not return. The old trading post sat in neutral territory, a crumbling structure that had once facilitated commerce between wolf packs and human settlements. Now it was just bones and shadows, perfect for an ambush. Elara dismounted a quarter-mile away, as the message had demanded. The warriors melted into the forest, invisible and deadly. Draven wanted to stay with her, but she'd convinced him to take position where he could see everything, where the bond would remain strong, but he'd be protected. She walked alone toward the trading post, her heart thundering against her ribs. The silver power hummed beneath her skin, eager and dangerous. She'd spent the ride preparing herself mentally, opening the channels Moira's book had described, ready to do something no one had attempted in centuries. Figures emerged from the shadows as she approached. 30 raiders, all armed, all watching her with predatory focus. And in the center, bound and gagged, was Mira. Her sister's eyes widened with terror and relief when she saw Elara. A man stepped forward, tall and scarred, wearing armor that marked him as a mercenary commander. The legendary queen. I expected someone more impressive. Disappointment is a common feeling around me. Elara kept her voice steady. Release my sister. I'm here, as demanded. Oh, we'll release her. The commander smiled. After you demonstrate this miraculous power, everyone's talking about. My employer wants proof before committing resources to your capture. Your employer? Elara's mind raced. Who sent you? You'll meet them soon enough. The commander gestured, and 2 raiders dragged Mira forward. One held a blade to her throat. Show us the silver light. Prove you're worth the trouble, or she dies right now. Elara looked at her sister, seeing the terror in those young eyes. Seeing the faith, too. The absolute belief that Elara would save her, that everything would be okay because her big sister was here. She couldn't let that faith be misplaced. Fine. Elara raised her hands, letting the silver light begin to glow beneath her skin. But I should warn you, you have no idea what you're asking for. Enlighten us. The commander's smile widened. Gladly. Elara reached out through the bond, finding Draven's presence like a beacon in darkness. Then she did something insane. She extended the bond outward, connecting not just to him but to all 20 warriors hidden in the forest. She felt their surprise, their confusion, then their acceptance as they understood what she was asking. Trust me, she sent through the newly formed connections. And be ready. The silver light exploded from her body, but this time she didn't try to heal or strengthen. This time, she weaponized it. The light swept across the trading post like a physical wave, and where it touched the raiders, they screamed. Not in pain, in paralysis. Every muscle locked, every weapon dropped uselessly to the ground. Elara felt the power draining from her at a terrifying rate, felt it pulling strength from Draven and the warriors through the bonds she'd created. But she held steady, channeling more and more energy until the entire enemy force was frozen in place. "Mira, run!" she shouted. Her sister didn't hesitate. She broke free from the paralyzed raiders and sprinted toward the forest. But Elara had made a critical miscalculation. The commander wasn't alone. There were more raiders hidden in the ruins beyond the reach of her initial attack. They emerged now, dozens of them, all armed with weapons designed specifically to counter her power. Silver chains, enchanted blades, tools built to capture, not kill. Impressive, the commander said, his voice strained but functional. Whatever protection he carried had partially shielded him. But my employer predicted you'd do something like this. Did you really think we'd come unprepared? Arrows flew from the ruins, not aimed at Elara, but at the forest where Draven and the warriors were hidden. Screams erupted as the ambush was reversed, as the trap within the trap was sprung. Through the bond, Elara felt warriors falling, felt Draven's rage as he realized they'd walked into something far more sophisticated than expected. Felt him fighting desperately to reach her through overwhelming numbers. "Stop!" Elara released the paralysis, letting the raiders recover. "I surrender. Just stop attacking them." "Oh, we're not stopping." The commander gestured and more arrows flew. "We're eliminating every witness. Then we're taking you to our employer, and your power, that beautiful, terrible power, will serve a new master." Elara felt something break inside her. Not physically, but fundamentally. She tried to be strategic, tried to use her power carefully. But careful wasn't enough. Not against enemies this prepared, this ruthless. So she stopped being careful. She opened herself completely to the silver light, letting it flood through her without restraint. The power responded with terrifying eagerness, pouring out in waves that made her previous displays look like candle flickers. But this time, she didn't try to control who it touched or how it affected them. She channeled it through every bond she'd created, Draven, the 20 warriors, even the connection she'd formed with the paralyzed raiders. And instead of healing or strengthening, she did something the ancient texts had warned against. She resurrected the fallen. Every warrior who died in the ambush suddenly gasped back to life, their fatal wounds closing, their eyes blazing with silver light. They rose with inhuman speed and strength, weapons in hand, fueled by power that shouldn't exist. The raiders' confidence shattered instantly. Their ambush had become a nightmare, an army that refused to die, empowered by something beyond their understanding. "Fall back!" the commander screamed. "Everyone fall back!" But it was too late. The empowered warriors crashed into the enemy lines with devastating force. Draven fought at the front, his already formidable abilities amplified by the silver light flowing through their bond. He was unstoppable, a whirlwind of violence and precision that cut through raiders like they were made of smoke. But Elara barely saw any of it. The power was consuming her, burning through her life force with every heartbeat. She'd channeled too much, spread the bonds too thin, pushed beyond every limit Moira had warned about. She felt her body starting to fail, felt the silver light beginning to turn inward, consuming the very life it had protected. Through the dimming haze, she saw Mira safe in the forest, saw the raiders routing, their formation broken, saw Draven cutting down the commander with brutal efficiency. Mission accomplished, she thought distantly. Mira's safe, the threats eliminated. That's enough. Then darkness claimed her and she fell. She woke to voices shouting, hands gripping her shoulders, and the overwhelming sensation of power being forcefully pulled from her body. Her eyes fluttered open to see Draven above her, his face twisted with desperation and fury. "Stay with me," he commanded, his voice rough. "You don't get to die. I won't allow it." "Not your choice," Elara managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Everything is my choice." Draven pressed his bleeding palm against hers, reopening their original bond scar, including this. He did something Elara had thought impossible. He reversed the flow of power. Instead of drawing strength from him through the bond, he poured his own life force into her, using their connection to anchor her when she should have burned away completely. The silver light that had been consuming her suddenly stabilized, fueled by Draven's strength instead of her own dwindling reserves. She gasped as life flooded back into her limbs as the darkness retreated. "You're insane," she breathed. "You would know." Draven pulled her upright, his golden eyes blazing. "Don't ever do that again. Don't ever make me watch you die." Around them, the battlefield was chaos. The warriors she'd resurrected were still fighting, but the silver light was beginning to fade from their eyes. The power she'd channeled through them was dissipating, returning to wherever it had come from. Or rather, returning to her and Draven, flowing back through bonds that should have killed them both, but somehow held. Thorn appeared, blood splattered, but alive. "The raiders are routed. We have prisoners, and—" she hesitated. "We found something. Documents. Orders from whoever orchestrated this." "Who?" Elara forced herself to stand despite trembling legs. "Lord Malser." Thorn's expression was grim. "But he's not working alone. There's a coalition, human warlords and dissenting wolf packs, all united against your rule, my king. They're planning something bigger. This was just the first strike. Draven's jaw clenched. How big? Full-scale war. Thorn handed him a blood-stained document. They're gathering forces from every territory you've conquered, everyone with a grudge, and they know about her power now. They'll be prepared. Let them prepare. Draven's voice was cold steel. They just learned what happens when they threaten what's mine. We'll be ready. Mira ran to Elara, throwing her arms around her sister. You came. You actually came. Always. Elara hugged her tightly, feeling tears finally break free. I'll always come for you. But even as she held her sister, even as victory settled over the battlefield, Elara felt the truth of what she'd unleashed. The power that had saved them tonight had also painted a target on her back so large it could be seen from every corner of the territories. War was coming. Not the small skirmishes and border disputes that had marked Draven's rule, but something larger and more terrible. And she'd just proven herself to be both the kingdom's greatest weapon and its most dangerous liability. Through the bond, she felt Draven's grim acceptance of the same truth. They'd won the battle but revealed their hand in the process. Every enemy now knew what she could do, and would be planning accordingly. We need to get back to the fortress, Draven said, scanning the forest with predatory alertness. This isn't over. It's barely begun. He was right. Elara could feel it in her bones, in the silver power that still hummed beneath her skin. The real war hadn't started yet, but when it did, she'd be ready. She'd proven tonight that she could become something terrible and powerful when necessary, could push past every limit, break every rule, sacrifice anything to protect the people she loved. The question was whether she'd survive what she'd have to become, and whether the kingdom, whether Draven, could survive her. They reached Stoneheart Fortress as dawn broke, the survivors limping through gates that felt less like sanctuary and more like the eye of an approaching storm. Elara carried Mira herself, refusing to let her sister out of her sight, despite exhaustion that went bone deep. The silver power had retreated to a quiet hum beneath her skin, but she could still feel its hunger, a constant reminder of what she'd become. Draven issued orders with mechanical efficiency, his voice cutting through the chaos of wounded warriors and panicked servants. Get the injured to the infirmary. Lock down all entrances. I want scouts on every approach route and runners ready to carry messages to our allied territories. And someone bring me the prisoners. Now! The raiders they'd captured were dragged into the courtyard, bloodied and defiant. Elara watched from the fortress steps, feeling Mira trembling against her side. Through the bond, she felt Draven's cold calculation as he studied the prisoners, weighing their worth as information sources against the message their execution would send. They know something, Thorn said quietly, appearing beside Elara. Look at their eyes. They're not afraid. They should be terrified, but they're not. She was right. The prisoners watched Draven with something closer to anticipation than fear, as if they were waiting for something. Alara's instinct screamed warning. Get away from them! But her shout came a heartbeat too late. The prisoners moved in perfect synchronization, their hands going to hidden vials concealed in their armor. They drank simultaneously, some kind of poison or drug that worked instantly. Their bodies convulsed once, then went still. Check them, Draven commanded, but the fortress healers confirmed what everyone already knew. All 6 prisoners were dead, their secrets dying with them. Suicide pacts. Corvus kicked one of the bodies in frustration. They were never meant to be interrogated. This whole capture was just another layer of the plan. What plan? Mira's voice was small, frightened. What's happening? Elara looked down at her sister, seeing the innocence that had somehow survived everything. War is happening, real war, and you need to be somewhere safe. I'm not leaving you again. Mira gripped Elara's hand. You almost died saving me. I won't. You will. Draven's voice cut across the courtyard like a blade. Because keeping you here makes you a liability. Another tool our enemies can use against the Queen. Against me. He gestured to 2 of his personal guards. Escort her to the southern sanctuary. She'll be protected there. No! Mira pulled away from the guards. Elara, please. Listen to him. Elara cupped her sister's face, forcing herself to be strong when she wanted to hold on and never let go. This fortress is about to become the center of something terrible. I need to know you're safe. I need to focus on what's coming without worrying about you. Can you do that for me? Mira's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Will I see you again? Yes? Elara pulled her into a fierce embrace. I promise. When this is over, when the danger has passed, I'll come for you. We'll rebuild our pact together, make it strong again. You'd better, Mira's voice broke, because you're all the family I have left. Elara watched her sister disappear into the fortress, escorted by guards who would keep her safe or die trying. The moment Mira was gone, Elara felt the last tether to her old life severing. She wasn't Marcus Vane's daughter anymore, wasn't the desperate girl who'd agreed to marry a monster to save her people. She was something else now, something the territories had never seen before. The War Council convenes in 1 hour. Draven's voice pulled her back to immediate reality. I need you there. They need to see you, see what you've become. Otherwise, the fractured packs will scatter at the first sign of real threat. What I've become. Elara turned to face him, seeing her reflection in his golden eyes. You mean a weapon? I mean a queen who can turn battlefields into graveyards with a thought. Draven moved closer, lowering his voice. They're terrified of you, Elara. The warriors, the servants, even Thorn. They all felt what you did last night, felt you reach into their minds through bonds that shouldn't exist, felt you puppet their bodies with power no one should possess. So yes, they're terrified. But terror can be useful if directed properly. I don't want people to fear me. Then you're in the wrong profession. Draven's expression was hard but not unkind. Fear and respect are two sides of the same coin in our world. The question is whether you can transform that fear into loyalty before our enemies arrive. The War Council gathered in the Great Hall, a circular chamber dominated by a map table the size of a small boat. Representatives from every allied territory stood around it. Wolfpack alphas, human lords who'd sworn fealty to Draven's rule, and trademasters whose wealth funded the kingdom's armies. All of them watched Elara enter with expressions ranging from awe to suspicion. The legendary queen, Lord Castellan, an aging human noble with more scars than hair, spoke first. We've heard stories about what happened at the trading post, raising the dead, controlling minds, power that defies natural law. I didn't raise the dead. Elara kept her voice steady. I healed fatal wounds before death could claim them, and I didn't control anyone. I channeled power through bonds they consented to. Semantics. Alpha Garrick, a massive wolf from the Eastern Territories, growled the word. You turned warriors into puppets, made them dance on your strings. That's not healing, that's domination. That's survival. Draven's voice cut through the rising murmurs. The queen did what was necessary to protect her sister and our warriors. Would you prefer she'd let them die? Let the raiders escape with intelligence about our defenses? I prefer we understood what we're dealing with. Garrick's yellow eyes fixed on Elara. This power of hers, where does it come from? What are its limits? And most importantly, can we trust someone who can reach into our minds whenever she chooses? The question hung in the air like smoke. Elara felt every gaze on her, felt the weight of their collective doubt and fear. A month ago, she would have wilted under such scrutiny, would have apologized, deflected, tried to make herself smaller, but she wasn't that girl anymore. You want to know if you can trust me? Elara moved to the map table, placing her hands flat on its surface. Here's what I know. War is coming, a coalition of enemies who've united specifically to destroy this kingdom. They know about my power now. They'll be prepared, and your choice is simple. Stand with me and fight, or run, and hope they forget about you before they come to claim your territories. That's not an answer, Castellan objected. Yes, it is. Elara met his gaze. I'm not going to grovel for your trust. I'm not going to pretend I understand my own power completely, because I don't. What I do understand is that every person in this room has benefited from the stability King Draven has built. You've grown wealthy from his trade routes, safe from his armies, powerful from his protection. And now, when he needs you to stand against a real threat, you're questioning whether to support the weapon he's given you? Weapon. Garrick spat the word. You admit that's what you are. I'm whatever I need to be to survive. Elara's voice turned cold. I was a desperate girl from a dying pack. Then I was a political bride. Then I was a student learning to fight. Now I'm something else. Something powerful enough to make our enemies think twice before attacking. And if that makes me a weapon, fine. But weapons work both ways. You can aim me at your enemies, or you can make me your enemy by questioning my loyalty when we should be preparing for war. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Then Thorn stepped forward, her ice-blue eyes gleaming with approval. The Queen speaks truth. I fought beside her, watched her risk herself to save warriors who'd done nothing to earn her protection. Whatever she is, whatever power she carries, it's been used to protect this kingdom, not threaten it. Easy for you to say, Garrick countered. You're the king's lapdog. You'd support him if he declared war on the sun itself. Careful. Draven's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. Captain Thorn has earned her position through blood and loyalty. Question her integrity again, and we'll settle the matter traditionally. Garrick's hand moved to his weapon, but Castellan placed a restraining hand on his shoulder. This isn't helping. We're here to discuss strategy, not tear ourselves apart with infighting. Then discuss. Elara pulled the captured documents from her belt, spreading them across the map. These are the orders we found on the raiders. They detail the coalition's formation, which territories have joined, which are considering it, which are being coerced through threats or bribery. Lord Malser is the public face, but he's being funded by someone called the Architect, someone with resources that dwarf anything Malser could command alone. Draven studied the documents, his expression darkening with each page. The Architect. I've heard rumors about this player, a shadow figure who's been consolidating power in the Eastern Kingdoms for years. But I didn't think they'd move this quickly. They're not moving quickly, they're moving smart. Elara pointed to markings on the map. Look at the territories they've targeted. Every single one has strategic value. Deep harbors for naval support, mountain passes for controlling trade. And here, she tapped a region south of Stoneheart. The Vane territories, my father's land. Hope to understanding rippled through the room. They wanted your pack as a staging ground, Corvus said slowly. That's why they let your people starve instead of conquering you outright. They were softening you up, waiting until you were desperate enough to ally with them against Draven. But I married him instead. Elara felt pieces clicking into place. I disrupted their timeline, forced them to accelerate their plans, which means they're not fully prepared yet. Draven's eyes gleamed with predatory focus. They revealed themselves too early because you complicated their strategy. That gives us an opening. An opening to do what? Garrick demanded. We're outnumbered. The Coalition controls territories from here to the Eastern Sea. Even with the Queen's power, we can't fight a war on 6 fronts simultaneously. We don't fight on 6 fronts. Elara traced lines on the map, seeing the pattern. We collapse their coalition before it fully forms. Look, most of these territories joined under duress. They're afraid of the Architect, afraid of being conquered, but they're also afraid of Draven. If we can prove the coalition is weaker than they've been told, we create doubt. Thorn finished the thought. Turn their fear against them, make them question whether betting against the Winter Wolf was wise. Exactly. Elara looked at Draven. We need a demonstration. Something that shows the coalition what happens when they threaten your rule. You mean slaughter? Castellan's voice was flat. You're proposing we make an example of someone. I'm proposing we make them understand the cost of betrayal. Elara kept her voice steady despite the darkness of what she was suggesting. One decisive strike against a coalition stronghold. Something brutal enough to make the other territories reconsider their allegiance. That's monstrous, Garrick said, but his tone carried more calculation than condemnation. That's kingship. Draven's smile was sharp as broken glass. The Queen learns quickly. He turned to his generals. Corvus, what's our best target? Which coalition territory is most vulnerable? Brennan Hold, Corvus pointed to a fortress on the eastern border. It's Malser's primary supply depot. Well defended, but if we hit it fast and hard, we could cripple their logistics for months. And send a message that reaches every territory from here to the coast. Draven nodded. We move in 3 days. Give me a strike force of our best warriors, 200. All volunteers who understand this is a one-way mission until we win. I'm coming with you. Elara's voice cut through the planning. Every head turned toward her. Draven's expression was carefully neutral, but through the bond she felt his instant refusal building. Absolutely not, he he said. You've pushed your power to the breaking point twice in as many weeks. Another major use could kill you, or it could win us the war in a single stroke. Elara moved around the table until she stood directly across from him. They're expecting armies and sieges. They're not expecting me to walk through their gates and show them what real power looks like. This isn't about power, it's about risk. Draven's voice rose despite his attempt at control. You're the linchpin of our alliance. If you die, the coalition wins by default, because every territory allied with us scatters. And if I hide in this fortress while you fight alone, what message does that send? Elara challenged. That the legendary queen is too afraid to use her power when it matters? That she'll only fight when her own family is threatened? She has a point, Thorn said quietly. The territories need to see her strength, need to understand that binding themselves to our rule means binding themselves to something unstoppable. Or they'll see her die and realize she was mortal after all. Draven's hands clenched on the table edge. I won't risk that. It's not your risk to manage. Elara held his gaze, letting him feel her determination through the bond. I'm going. The question is whether you'll waste time arguing or start planning how to use me effectively. The silence stretched until Garrick laughed, a harsh barking sound. I'll give you this, Queen Elara. You've got more balls than most alphas I've met. Does that mean you're with us? Elara asked. It means I'm not stupid enough to bet against someone who can raise the dead. Garrick's smile showed too many teeth. My pack will contribute 50 warriors to the strike force. But I want assurances, blood oaths that this power of yours won't be used against allied territories. You have my word. Elara extended her hand. And if I break it, you're welcome to try killing me yourself. Garrick studied her for a long moment, then clasped her hand. Deal, though I suspect trying to kill you would be the last mistake I ever made. One by one, the other council members pledged their support, some with enthusiasm, others with clear reluctance, but all of them recognizing that the alternative, facing the coalition alone, was worse than trusting the untested queen. When the council finally dispersed, Elara found herself alone with Draven in the emptying hall. He stood at the map table, staring at Brennenhold's location with an expression she couldn't read. You're angry, she said. I'm terrified. The admission came quietly. Every time you use that power, I feel it draining you through the bond. Feel pieces of your life burning away to fuel something that should never exist. And you want to march into an enemy fortress and do it again on an even larger scale. I know the risks. Do you? Draven finally looked at her, and the raw emotion in his golden eyes nearly stole her breath. Because I don't think you understand what it costs me to watch you sacrifice yourself. To feel your pain as my own and know there's nothing I can do to stop it. Elara moved closer, reaching up to touch his face. Then help me survive it. Anchor me, like you did at the trading post. Use the bond to keep me grounded when the power tries to consume me. That nearly killed us both. But it didn't. Elara's thumb traced his jawline. We're stronger together than apart. That's what the bond means. That's what partnership means. Draven caught her hand, pressing it harder against his face, like he was trying to memorize the feeling. I can't lose you. I know that makes me weak, makes me compromised as a king, but I can't. You've become necessary. Good. Elara stepped even closer, until they were sharing breath. Because you've become necessary to me too. This started as survival, as a desperate bargain to save my pack. But somewhere along the way, it became real. You became real. Elara. Whatever he'd been about to say was lost as she pulled his face down and kissed him. It wasn't gentle or uncertain. It was desperate and fierce and full of everything they hadn't said. The fear, the need, the impossible connection that had grown despite every reason it shouldn't. Draven responded instantly, his arms crushing her against him like he could keep her safe through sheer force of will. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. This is a terrible idea, he whispered. Most of my ideas are. Elara smiled despite everything. But they seem to work out. Sometimes. His laugh was rough. And sometimes they nearly get you killed. Then I'm glad I have you to even the odds. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other in the privacy of the empty hall. Then duty reasserted itself, dragging them back to the reality of armies and strategies and wars that didn't care about stolen moments. 3 days, Draven said, his voice returning to the cold certainty of a king. We prepare, we plan, and we make sure every warrior understands what they're walking into. And you, he touched her face one more time, gentle despite his warrior's calluses. You stay close to me during the assault. No heroics, no solo charges. We fight together or not at all. Together, Elara agreed. Always together. The next 3 days transformed Stoneheart Fortress into a weapon being sharpened for a single purpose. Warriors drilled until they moved like extensions of a single will. Supply lines were secured. Scouts mapped every approach to Brennan Hold, identifying weaknesses and defenses that had stood unchallenged for decades. And Elara trained with her power under Moira's guidance, learning to channel it with precision rather than overwhelming force. The old healer pushed her mercilessly, forcing her to maintain bonds with multiple warriors simultaneously, to heal and strengthen without losing herself to the Silverlight's hunger. You're getting stronger, Moira observed on the second day, watching Elara hold connections to 15 warriors at once. But strength isn't the same as control. Power this raw wants to be used. It whispers promises of invincibility, of godhood. You must never listen to those whispers. Why not? Elara released the bonds, gasping as the power flooded back into her core. Why shouldn't I embrace what I've become? Because the ancient bloodlines all fell the same way. Moira's expression was grave. They stopped seeing themselves as protectors and started seeing themselves as gods, started believing their power made them superior to those they were meant to serve. And when that happened, when arrogance replaced humility, the power consumed them completely. I'm not arrogant. Not yet. Moira handed her water. But 3 weeks ago, you were a terrified girl agreeing to marry a monster to save her pack. Now you're planning to assault an enemy fortress and discussing slaughter as casually as weather patterns. That's not growth, that's transformation. And transformation without wisdom leads to destruction. The warning stayed with Elara as she prepared for battle, donning armor that had been specially crafted to accommodate her fighting style. Lightweight, but reinforced, decorated with silver wolves that seemed to move in the firelight. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. You look like a queen, Thorn said from the doorway. A warrior queen. The kind songs are written about. Or the kind warnings are written about. Elara adjusted her blade harness. Moira thinks I'm losing myself to the power. Are you? I don't know. Elara turned from the mirror. I feel different, harder, like parts of me that used to feel everything are going numb. That's not power. That's survival. Thorn moved into the room. I've seen it happen to every warrior who lives long enough. You can't feel everything and still function in battle. So you build walls, create distance between who you are and what you have to do. Draven doesn't have walls. Elara thought of the emotion she felt through their bond. He feels everything. He's just learned to act despite it. The king is unique. Thorn's expression softened fractionally. I've served him for 15 years, watched him build this kingdom from nothing but will and violence. And in all that time, I've never seen him care about anything the way he cares about you. We're bonded. He doesn't have a choice. The bond doesn't create emotion, it amplifies what already exists. Thorn studied her. He could have rejected you, kept you at arm's length, used you as the political tool you were meant to be. Instead, he let you in, let you see his weaknesses, his fears. That's not obligation, that's choice. Before Elara could respond, horns sounded across the fortress. The call to gather. The march to war was beginning. They rode out at dusk, 200 warriors moving with silent efficiency through mountain passes that would hide their approach. Draven led from the front, his armor black as midnight, his presence radiating the controlled violence that had made him legendary. Elara rode beside him, feeling the weight of every gaze. Some warriors looked at her with hope, others with fear, but all of them looked. She'd become a symbol of power, of possibility, of everything that could go terribly right or catastrophically wrong. How are you feeling? Draven asked quietly as they navigated a narrow trail. Terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Elara kept her voice low. Is that normal? For what we're about to do? Yes. His golden eyes scanned the darkening horizon. The fear keeps you sharp. The exhilaration keeps you moving. Together, they might keep you alive. And if they don't, then I'll drag you back from whatever void tries to claim you. Draven's voice was absolute, even if I have to burn the world down to do it. Through the bond, Elara felt the truth of that promise, felt how deeply he meant it, how completely he'd committed himself to her survival. It should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified her, because she knew she'd make the same promise, would sacrifice anything to keep him safe. They were no longer just king and queen, allies bound by political necessity. They'd become something far more dangerous, two people who would tear the world apart rather than lose each other. Brennan Hold appeared on the horizon as midnight approached, a fortress of gray stone perched on a cliff overlooking the eastern trade routes. Lights burned in its towers, and patrols walked its walls with disciplined precision. It looked impregnable. It looked like exactly the kind of challenge that would make a statement. Draven raised his hand, signaling the force to halt. They'd stopped 3 miles out, hidden in a forest that provided cover and concealment. Warriors dismounted silently, checking weapons and armor with the practiced efficiency of veterans. Final briefing, Draven called softly, and his commanders gathered. We have a 4-hour window before dawn. The plan remained simple. Breach the gates, eliminate resistance, secure the supply depot, and burn everything we can't carry. The Queen, he glanced at Elara, will provide support as needed. Her power is our ace, but it's also our most precious resource. We don't waste it on minor skirmishes. What about prisoners? Corvus asked. No prisoners. Draven's voice was cold. This is a message, not a negotiation. Everyone inside that fortress made their choice when they allied with the coalition. Now they face the consequences. A few warriors shifted uncomfortably, but no one objected. They all understood what this was. Not just a raid, but a declaration. A line drawn in blood that said challenging the Winter Wolf came with absolute costs. Elara felt sick with the certainty of what was coming, but she didn't speak. This was the world she'd chosen to inhabit. These were the choices rulers made when gentler options had run out. Move out, Draven commanded. They advanced through darkness, using terrain and shadows to mask their approach. Elara could feel her power building with every step, responding to the tension and anticipation. The silver light wanted to be used, wanted to explode outward and reshape the battlefield. Not yet, she told it silently. Not until it matters. They reached the outer walls as the moon reached its apex. Guards patrolled above, unaware of the death waiting below. Draven signaled, and archers moved into position, their arrows finding throats with silent precision. Bodies fell without sound. The gates were reinforced oak bound with iron, impregnable to normal assault. But Elara wasn't normal. She stepped forward, placing her hands against the wood. The silver light flared, and she felt the gate's structure through her power, every timber, every joint, every weakness. Then she pushed. The gates exploded inward, torn from their hinges by force that shouldn't exist. Alarms erupted immediately, but it was too late. Draven's warriors poured through the breach like a flood, and the massacre began. Elara had seen battle before, but nothing like this. This wasn't defense or survival. This was systematic destruction. Warriors cut down defenders with brutal efficiency, showing no mercy, offering no quarter. The fortress courtyard became a charnel house within minutes. Through it all, Draven fought with terrifying precision, his blade finding vital points with every strike. He wasn't just killing, he was making art of violence, demonstrating why he'd conquered 7 territories and held them through force of will. And Elara kept pace beside him, using her power surgically. A burst of silver light to blind a cluster of archers. A wave of force to knock enemies off battlements. Healing touches for allied warriors who took injuries that would have been fatal. They moved deeper into the fortress, cutting through resistance like a blade through silk. The defenders tried to form defensive positions, but Draven's strategy was perfect, hitting multiple points simultaneously, creating chaos that prevented coordinated response. Then they reached the central keep, where Lord Mouser himself waited with his elite guard. The Winter Wolf. Mouser's voice was surprisingly calm for a man watching his fortress burn. I wondered if you'd come personally. I wanted to see your face when you realized your coalition was built on sand. Draven advanced steadily. Did you really think you could challenge me? Did the architect promise you victory? The architect promised me nothing. Mouser drew his blade. But they didn't need to. You've grown complacent, Draven, built your kingdom on fear and violence, never realizing those foundations would eventually crack. My foundations are stronger than ever, Draven gestured to Elara. I have something the architect can never match. Something that turns your armies into corpses and your plans into ashes. Mouser's eyes fixed on Elara, and she saw recognition and terror. The Silver Queen. They said she could raise the dead, control minds, but I didn't believe it until now. Believe it. Elara let the power flare, silver light dancing across her skin. And understand that every territory considering alliance with your coalition is watching what happens here. They're learning what it costs to oppose us. Then let them learn well. Mouser charged, his elite guard flanking him. The battle was brief and brutal. Draven met Mouser's blade with his own, their weapons clashing with sounds like thunder. The elite guard tried to flank, but Elara's power lashed out, not to kill, but to paralyze. They froze mid-strike, their muscles locked by silver light. Draven's blade found Mouser's throat. The warlord fell, blood pooling on ancient stone. Burn the supplies, Draven commanded. Leave nothing they can use. Warriors spread through the fortress, setting fires that would be visible for miles. The message was clear and absolute. This is what happens when you challenge the Winter Wolf. But as Elara watched the flames rise, as she felt the weight of lives ended and futures destroyed, something shifted inside her. Not guilt, she was too far gone for guilt, but a cold certainty that she'd crossed a line tonight, that she'd become something her younger self would have been horrified by. And she didn't care. Through the bond, she felt Draven's approval mixing with his own darkness. They were becoming mirrors of each other, two people who'd learned that survival sometimes required becoming monsters. My king! A runner appeared, breathless. Scouts report movement from the coalition territories. Word of our attack has spread. They're retreating, pulling back from forward positions. Draven's smile was terrible and triumphant. Fear. They're afraid. Good, Elara said quietly. Let them be afraid. Let them understand what happens when they threaten what's ours. As dawn broke over the burning fortress, as their warriors regrouped with minimal casualties and maximum spoils, Elara felt the shift in how they looked at her. No longer as the untested bride or the mysterious queen. Now they saw her as she truly was, a weapon that had just proven its edge. And standing beside Draven amid the ashes of their enemies, Elara realized she'd finally found where she belonged. Not as the desperate girl from a dying pack, not as the political bride trying to survive, but as a queen who'd learned to turn survival into dominance, fear into power, and necessity into legend. The war wasn't over. The architects still lurked in shadows, planning their next move. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Elara felt like they might actually win, because she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was conquering. The journey back to Stoneheart felt different than the march out. Warriors who'd ridden in tense silence now talked in low voices, sharing stories of the battle, of what they'd witnessed the queen do. Elara caught fragments as she rode. Silver light bright as the sun. Froze 20 men with a thought. She's not human anymore, she's something else. They weren't wrong. Draven rode beside her in silence, but through the bond she felt his satisfaction mixing with concern. The raid had been a tactical masterpiece, minimal casualties, maximum impact, a message sent that would echo across every territory. But it had also revealed just how far Elara's power could reach, and that revelation carried consequences neither of them could fully predict. You're worried, she said quietly. I'm calculating. Draven's golden eyes scanned the horizon, always watchful. We've disrupted the coalition's timeline, maybe even fractured their unity. But we've also confirmed you're exactly what the architect wants. The question is what they'll do next. Maybe they'll retreat, decide we're too dangerous to challenge. Or they'll escalate. Draven's jaw tightened. Desperate enemies make reckless choices. And the architect hasn't survived this long by being predictable. He was right. The attack on Brennan Hold had been a gamble. Win big or lose everything. They'd won this round, but the game was far from over. They reached Stoneheart 3 days later to find the fortress transformed. Word of their victory had spread faster than wildfire, and delegations from previously neutral territories lined the courtyard, all seeking audiences, all wanting to pledge allegiance to the king who'd proven his power and the queen who wielded forces beyond nature. They smell weakness in the coalition, Thorne observed as they dismounted, and they're scrambling to align themselves with the winning side before it's too late. Good. Draven handed his reins to a stable hand. Let them grovel. Let them understand that loyalty to our rule is the only path to survival. But Elara saw something else in the gathered delegations, fear masked as respect. These weren't allies joining willingly. They were survivors making calculated choices, betting that submission to Draven was less dangerous than facing his wrath. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt hollow. Over the next week, Stoneheart became the center of a political storm. Territory after territory formally withdrew from the coalition, publicly denouncing the architect as a shadow figure who'd led them astray. Trade agreements were renegotiated. Borders were redrawn. And through it all, Draven moved with ruthless efficiency, consolidating power while the coalition crumbled. But the architect remained silent. No retaliation, no counterstrike, no response to the devastating loss of Brennan Hold. That silence worried Elara more than any threat. They're planning something, she told Draven one night as they stood on the battlements overlooking the kingdom that had grown beyond recognition. This is too quiet. I know. Draven's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. I've had scouts searching for any sign of coalition activity. Nothing. It's like they've vanished, or they're waiting for us to lower our guard. We won't. Draven squeezed her hand. I've positioned warriors at every major crossing, fortified every vulnerable point. If they move, we'll see them coming. Through the bond, Elara felt his confidence, but also his exhaustion. He'd been operating at maximum capacity for weeks, barely sleeping, constantly planning for threats from every direction. Even the winter wolf had limits. When was the last time you rested? She asked. I'll rest when the kingdom is secure. And when will that be? Next month? Next year? Never? Elara turned to face him. You can't protect everything forever. At some point, you have to trust that the foundations you've built will hold without constant vigilance. The moment I trust is the moment enemies strike. Draven's voice was flat. I've learned that lesson too many times. Then learn a new lesson. Elara stepped closer. Learn to share the burden. You have me now. You have Thorne, Corvus, dozens of capable commanders. Stop acting like you're alone when you're not. I am alone. The words came out raw, unguarded. I've always been alone. Even surrounded by armies, even sitting on a throne, I'm alone because I'm the only one who can make the choices that matter. The only one who carries the weight when those choices go wrong. That's not true anymore. Elara placed her hand over his heart, feeling it beat strong and steady. I carry that weight with you now. Through the bond, through choice, through everything we've become to each other. You're not alone unless you choose to be. Draven stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the war playing out behind his golden eyes. The instinct to reject connection fighting against the desperate need to believe her. Finally, slowly, he pulled her into his arms. I don't know how to do this, he admitted against her hair. How to be a king and a partner. How to rule with strength while trusting someone else with my weaknesses. We'll figure it out together. Elara wrapped her arms around him. Just like we've figured out everything else. They stood like that as night deepened around them, two people who'd been forced together by necessity and had somehow found something real in the wreckage. The attack came at dawn 3 days later, and it came from a direction no one had predicted. Elara woke to screams and the smell of smoke. She bolted from bed, throwing on clothes and weapons with practiced speed. Through the bond, she felt Draven's shock mixing with rage. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. She found him in the courtyard, surrounded by chaos. The inner keep was burning, flames licking at stone that should have been fireproof. Warriors fought desperately against enemies who'd somehow breached defenses that had never failed before. How did they get in? Elara shouted over the din. Betrayal! Also, Draven's voice was cold fury. Someone inside opened the gates. Someone we trusted. The truth hit like a physical blow. All their precautions, all their preparations, useless against an enemy within their own walls. The architect didn't retreat, Elara realized. They infiltrated. They've been here all along, waiting for the perfect moment. And we gave it to them. Draven cut down an enemy soldier with vicious efficiency. By celebrating our victory, by lowering our guard just enough, an explosion rocked the fortress, and the western tower collapsed in a shower of stone and fire. Warriors screamed, trapped beneath rubble. Through the chaos, Elara saw them, coalition soldiers pouring through breaches that shouldn't exist, attacking with coordination that spoke of extensive planning. This wasn't a raid. This was an invasion, and they'd been preparing for it while Stoneheart celebrated. "Fall back to the inner keep," Draven commanded. "Protect the queen!" But Elara wasn't retreating, not this time. She'd spent weeks learning control, mastering her power, preparing for exactly this moment. The silver light blazed to life beneath her skin, responding to her fury and fear. "No," she said, her voice carrying across the courtyard with unnatural resonance. "We end this now." She opened herself to the bond, not just to Draven, but to every loyal warrior in the fortress. Felt their terror, their determination, their willingness to die protecting what they'd built. And she channeled that collective strength into something the territories had never seen. Silver light exploded from her body in a wave that swept across the entire fortress. Where it touched loyal warriors, wounds closed and exhaustion vanished. Where it touched enemies, they froze mid-strike, paralyzed by power that overwhelmed their senses. But this time, Elara didn't stop there. She'd learned from every previous use, understood the cost and the potential. So instead of just healing or paralyzing, she did something far more dangerous. She connected every loyal warrior to each other through bonds of pure power, creating a network of shared strength that made each individual fighter exponentially more capable. They moved with unified purpose, anticipated each other's actions, fought as extensions of a single unstoppable will. The coalition soldiers didn't stand a chance. Within minutes, the invasion force was either dead or surrendering, their carefully laid plans shattered by a display of power no one had anticipated. But Elara paid the price. The amount of energy required to create and maintain that many bonds simultaneously was staggering. She felt her life force burning away, felt the silver light consuming her from the inside out, just like Moira had warned. Through the bond, Draven felt it too. He fought his way to her side, catching her as her legs gave out. "Stop," he commanded. "Release the bonds before they kill you." "Can't," Elara gasped. "If I release now, warriors will collapse. Give enemies opening." "I don't care about the warriors," Draven's voice cracked with desperation. "Let them go." "No." Elara forced herself to remain conscious, to hold the bond steady even as they drained her. "We finish this. Together." Then she felt it. Through the network she'd created, through bonds that connected her to hundreds of warriors simultaneously. Someone was approaching the fortress, someone whose presence radiated power that rivaled her own. The architect, finally revealing themselves. "They're here," Elara whispered. "The mastermind. They're coming." The figure that entered the courtyard wore robes the color of midnight, their face hidden beneath a deep hood. But Elara didn't need to see their face to feel their power. Ancient, vast, and absolutely confident. Impressive. The architect's voice was neither male nor female, echoing with harmonics that suggested something not entirely human. The silver bloodline manifests again after all these centuries. I'd begun to think it lost forever. "Who are you?" Draven demanded, moving to shield Elara despite her protests. "I am continuity." The architect pushed back their hood, revealing a face that shifted and changed with each moment. Young, then old, male, then female, human, then something else. "I am the thread that connects past to future, the force that ensures power flows to those worthy of wielding it. And I have been searching for her," they pointed at Elara, "for a very long time. You orchestrated everything." Understanding flooded through Elara even as the bonds drained her further. The coalition, the attacks, weakening my pack, all of it to force me to manifest my power. "Of course." The architect smiled, and the expression was terrible in its serenity. "The silver bloodline only awakens under extreme duress. I needed you desperate enough to bond with someone powerful, threatened enough to push past your limits, and you performed beautifully." "Why?" Elara forced herself upright, refusing to show weakness. What do you want with my power? Want? Nothing. The architect's shifting face settled into something almost paternal. I simply want to ensure it survives. The old bloodlines are dying out, consumed by lesser strains and human corruption. But you carry the pure thread, and with proper guidance, you could restore what was lost, could rebuild the world the ancients created before it fell to chaos and mediocrity. By destroying everyone who opposes you? Draven's blade was in his hand. By manipulating territories into war? By pruning the weak branches so the strong ones can flourish? The architect's tone suggested they were explaining something obvious to a slow child. Evolution through conflict, progress through struggle, the natural order I've maintained for centuries. You're insane, Elara said flatly. I'm necessary. The architect moved closer, and warriors tried to intercept but froze before they could take 3 steps. And I'm offering you a choice, Silver Queen. Join me. Let me teach you to use your power properly, to reshape the territories into something worthy of your heritage. Or resist, and watch everyone you care about die as your power consumes you from within. Through the bonds, Elara felt the truth of that threat. Maintaining this many connections was killing her. She had minutes at most before the strain became fatal. Don't listen, Draven growled. Whatever they're offering is poison. A smart king. The architect's smile widened. But intelligence won't save you. Only power matters in the end, and mine— Silver light erupted from their body, matching Elara's but twisted somehow, corrupted. Has been refined over centuries of practice. The two forces collided and reality buckled. Elara felt the architect's power trying to overwhelm hers, trying to dominate the bonds she'd created and turn them into chains. Felt their ancient knowledge pressing against her instinctive understanding, trying to prove superiority through sheer accumulated experience. But the architect had made a critical error. They'd assumed Elara was alone, that her power, however pure, couldn't match theirs without proper training. They'd forgotten about Draven. Through their bond, the original blood oath that had started everything, Elara felt her husband's absolute refusal to surrender, felt his strength flowing into her, anchoring her when the architect's assault should have torn her apart. And through the network she'd created, she felt hundreds of warriors making the same choice, offering their strength willingly, choosing to support their queen, even knowing it might kill them. The architect's confidence faltered. Impossible. You can't maintain that many bonds against my assault. The strain should have shattered your mind by now. It would have. Elara's voice strengthened as power flooded through the network, distributed across so many willing souls that no single person bore too much weight. If I was doing this alone, but I'm not. I never was. She pushed back against the architect's attack, but instead of fighting power with power, she did something unexpected. She opened the bonds wider, inviting the architect's force into the network she'd created. The ancient being realized their mistake too late. Their power, designed to dominate and control, crashed into a web of willing cooperation and mutual support. It thrashed like a predator caught in silk, unable to break free because there was no single point to attack, no individual will to overwhelm. The architect screamed, a sound that held centuries of frustration and fury. You're wasting it. All that potential, squandered on sentiment and weakness. No. Elara stepped forward, her entire body blazing with silver light that was somehow warm instead of consuming. I'm using it for what it was always meant for, not domination, not individual glory, but connection, protection, unity. The bonds tightened around the architect's power, and Elara felt the ancient being's essence beginning to fracture. They'd lived so long alone, wielding power in isolation, that they couldn't comprehend what Elara had created, couldn't understand strength that came from sharing rather than hoarding. You could have been magnificent, the architect whispered as their form began to dissolve. Could have ruled for centuries. Instead, you'll burn out in decades, consumed by the very connections you prize. Maybe. Elara felt tears on her cheeks, but didn't look away. But those decades will be real, will mean something, will be spent with people I love instead of alone with my power. Fool. The word held more pity than anger. Then the architect shattered. their ancient power dissipating into silver light that scattered across the dawn sky like stars finding their way home. Silence fell across the fortress. Elara released the bonds slowly, carefully, making sure each warrior could stand on their own before severing the connections. The network collapsed, and she collapsed with it. Draven caught her before she hit the ground, his arms crushing her against his chest. "Don't you dare die on me. Don't you dare." Not dying, Elara's voice was barely audible. Just really tired. "You destroyed an ancient power." Draven's laugh was shaky with relief. "You can be tired." Around them, warriors were picking themselves up, checking on fallen comrades, processing what they'd just witnessed. The invasion had been repelled. The coalition's mastermind was gone, and their queen had proven herself more powerful than legends. Thorn appeared, her ice-blue eyes wide with something close to awe. "My king, the coalition forces are surrendering across all territories. Word of the Architect's defeat is spreading faster than we can track. They're calling her the Unifier, the queen who bound an army with her will and shattered the oldest power in the territories." "Good." Draven's arms tightened around Elara. "Let them call her whatever they want, as long as they remember what happens when they threaten her." Elara drifted in and out of consciousness for 3 days. When she finally woke fully, she found herself in her chambers with Draven asleep in the chair beside her bed, exactly like the first time she'd used her power to save his warriors. Some things, apparently, came full circle. "You're awake." He jerked upright the moment she stirred. "How do you feel?" "Like I was turned inside out and reassembled by someone who'd never seen a human before." Elara sat up slowly. "How long was I out?" 3 days. Moira said your power was stabilizing itself, integrating everything you'd learned. She also said," Draven's voice caught, "she said you should be dead, that what you did should have killed you 10 times over. But it didn't." Elara touched his face, feeling the stubble that said he hadn't left her side. "Because I had you anchoring me, had hundreds of warriors sharing the burden." Still reckless, but Draven leaned into her touch. "Still terrifying. Still the bravest thing I've ever seen." "What happened while I was out?" "The war ended." Draven's smile was exhausted but genuine. Every coalition territory surrendered within 48 hours. Without the Architect's manipulation and resources, they had no will to continue. The territories are united under our rule now. All of them. That's what we wanted, isn't it? Unity, stability. "It is." Draven stood, moving to the window. "But I keep thinking about what the Architect said. About you burning out in decades instead of ruling for centuries. About the price you'll pay for using your power the way you do." "I've made my choice." Elara joined him at the window, looking out at the kingdom they'd built together. "I'd rather live 30 real years than 300 empty ones." "Even knowing it means leaving me alone again?" The vulnerability in his voice broke her heart. "You won't be alone. You'll have this kingdom, these people, everything we've built, and you'll have the memory of what we were to each other. That's more than most people get." "It's not enough." Draven turned to her, and the raw emotion in his golden eyes was staggering. "I love you. I don't know when it happened, don't know if it was the bond or something deeper, but I love you. And the thought of losing you, then don't think about it." Elara pulled him close, feeling his heartbeat against hers. "Think about now, about today, about all the days we do have instead of the ones we don't." "I love you," he repeated, like he needed her to understand the depth of it. "I know." Elara smiled through tears. "I love you too, and that's enough. That has to be enough." They stood together as the sun rose over a kingdom transformed. No longer a collection of fractured territories held together by fear, but something new. Something built on the impossible foundation of a bond that had started as survival and become something far more precious. The following weeks brought delegations from every corner of the territories, all seeking audiences with the king and queen who'd ended centuries of conflict. Borders were redrawn with cooperation instead of conquest. Trade agreements were negotiated in good faith, and slowly, carefully, the territories began to heal. Elara's father arrived 6 weeks after the final battle, bringing what remained of the Vane pack. They were healthier now, stronger, fed by the resources Draven had sent. Marcus looked at his daughter with awe and something close to fear. "You've changed," he said simply. "I had to." Elara embraced him anyway. "The girl you sent north died the moment she bonded with the winter wolf. What came back is something else." "A queen." Marcus held her at arm's length, studying her. "A legend. The wolf who united the territories through strength and compassion. Just someone trying to survive." But Elara smiled. "Isn't that what you taught me? That survival is victory enough?" "I taught you to endure." Marcus's eyes were bright with tears. "You taught yourself to conquer." Mira appeared from the crowd, and Elara swept her sister into a fierce hug. "You're safe. You're really safe. Because of you." Mira pulled back, her young face serious beyond her years. "They're saying you could have ruled alone, could have taken the architect's power and become unstoppable. Why didn't you?" "Because power that isolates isn't power, it's prison." Elara looked at Draven, who watched from across the courtyard with a small smile. "I learned that from someone who spent years trapped in that prison, who taught me that strength shared is strength multiplied. He loves you." Mira's observation was simple, certain. "Yes." Elara didn't bother denying it. "And I love him, despite everything that should have made it impossible." "Good." Mira squeezed her hand. "You deserve happiness. After everything you sacrificed for us, for the territories. You deserve to be happy." Did she? Elara wasn't sure. But watching the Vane pack integrate with Stoneheart's forces, watching former enemies share meals and stories, watching a kingdom being born from ashes, maybe that was happiness enough. Draven found her later, standing on the battlements where they'd shared so many conversations. Thinking about the future? Trying to. Elara leaned against him. "It's strange. A year ago I was a desperate girl from a dying pack. Now I'm a queen who destroyed an ancient power and united territories that have been at war for centuries. How did this become my life?" "One impossible choice at a time." Draven's arm wrapped around her waist, "starting with the choice to walk into my fortress instead of running. That wasn't much of a choice. My pack would have died." "You could have let them." Draven's voice was quiet. "Many would have chosen personal safety over collective survival. But you didn't. You never did. That's why you were able to defeat the architect, not because your power was stronger, but because you understood something they'd forgotten." "What's that?" "That we're stronger together than apart. That the bonds we forge with others don't make us weaker. They make us invincible." Draven turned her to face him. "You taught me that. Taught this entire kingdom that. I just did what was necessary to survive." "You did what was necessary to live," Draven corrected. "There's a difference. Survival is existing from one day to the next. Living is building something that matters, connecting with people who make the struggle worthwhile." "When did you become a philosopher?" "When I fell in love with a queen who sees the world differently than I do." Draven's smile was soft, genuine, so different from the cold mask he'd worn when they first met. "You changed me, Elara. Made me remember what it feels like to care about something beyond conquest and control." "Good." Elara stood on her toes to kiss him. "Because I plan to keep changing you, keep reminding you that you're not alone anymore." "Promise?" "Always." They stood together as the sun set over their kingdom, two people who'd started as strangers bound by political necessity and had become something far more profound. Partners, equals. Two halves of a whole that was stronger than either could be alone. 5 years later, Elara stood in the same spot, watching the sun set over a kingdom transformed beyond recognition. The territories weren't just united anymore, they were thriving. Trade routes connected regions that had been enemies for centuries. Wolf packs and human settlements coexisted peacefully, their children growing up knowing cooperation instead of conflict. And at the heart of it all, the bond between king and queen that had started everything. Draven found her there, just like he always did. Their connection didn't require words anymore. Through the bond and through 5 years of partnership, they'd learned to communicate in glances and touches and shared silences. "Thinking about the past?" he asked, settling beside her. "About how far we've come." Elara's hand rested on her slightly rounded belly. The child they'd made, against all odds, against Moira's warnings that using her power so extensively would leave her barren. About where we're going. Scared? Terrified. Elara smiled, but in a good way, the kind of fear that comes with building something precious instead of just surviving. We've done more than survive. Draven's hand covered hers, both of them feeling the flutter of new life beneath their palms. We've created a future, not just for us, but for everyone. Do you think it'll last? This peace we've built? Nothing lasts forever. Draven's voice was realistic, but not pessimistic. But what we've built, the foundations of cooperation, the understanding that strength comes from unity, that can endure, can be passed down to the next generation. Our child, Elara felt awe mixing with terror. They'll inherit all of this, the kingdom, the power, the responsibility. They'll inherit something more important. Draven turned her to face him. They'll inherit parents who love each other, who chose partnership over isolation, who proved that even the darkest circumstances can birth something beautiful. Elara felt tears on her cheeks. The good kind. The kind that came from overwhelming gratitude for a life she'd never expected to have. I love you. I know I say it all the time now, but I need you to know. I know. Draven kissed her, soft and certain. I've known since the night you risked everything to save your sister. Known that you're the bravest, most stubborn, most impossible person I've ever met. And I wouldn't change a single thing about you. Not even the part where I nearly got us both killed multiple times. Especially not that part. His smile was fierce and fond. Those moments taught me I had something worth dying for, worth living for. They stood together as stars emerged, their child growing between them, their kingdom spreading out below like a promise made real. The desperate girl and the lonely king who'd found each other in darkness and built something luminous. Elara thought about the architect's final words, about burning out in decades instead of ruling for centuries, and she realized she didn't care. These decades would be filled with love, purpose, and connections that made every day worthwhile. She'd rather have 30 real years than 300 empty ones. No regrets? Draven asked quietly, reading her thoughts through the bond they shared. Not a single one. Elara leaned into his warmth. This life, this love, this impossible kingdom we've built, it's more than I ever dreamed possible. Good. Draven's arms wrapped around her, protective and possessive. Because you're stuck with me now, for however long we have. Forever sounds good. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the bond humming between them, feeling their child's heartbeat, feeling the weight of a kingdom that had been built on blood and sacrifice but would endure through something stronger. Love, partnership, the unbreakable connection between two people who'd learned that survival alone was never enough, that living, truly living, required opening yourself to another person completely and trusting they'd catch you when you fell. And as night deepened over the kingdom they'd forged from impossibility, Elara knew with absolute certainty that every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of terror had been worth it, because she wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living, and that made all the difference.